This was the moment a climber completely lost control while descending Mount Reese. On a steep, snow-covered slope, he slipped, dropped his ice axe, and instantly lost his only way of stopping himself. Within seconds, he was tumbling head over heels down a roughly 45-degree incline, sliding and cartwheeling for nearly 600 meters while another climber's headcam captured the entire thing. But miraculously, after the uncontrolled slide finally stopped, he was somehow still conscious. He survived with only bruises and minor pain in his finger, and after being checked by a doctor in the group, he was able to stand up and walk down the mountain himself. This was the horrifying moment an Instagram free climber was forced into a dangerous descent while scaling an electrical tower. With no harness, no clips, and nothing but a strong grip keeping him alive, he was already hundreds of feet above the ground when a massive swarm of bees suddenly surrounded him. As the bees began attacking, he couldn't panic or swat them away without risking his life. Every movement had to stay controlled, since one small shift of weight could have easily sent him falling straight down. But despite the chaos, he maintained his composure, descending level by level, until he finally reached a safe enough height to jump and escape the swarm. Gabriela Martins Santos de Moura was a 31-year-old well-being influencer from Brazil who'd spent years trying to get pregnant with her husband. In February of 2026, she went to a human reproduction clinic in Sao Paulo to undergo an assisted fertility procedure as part of that effort. But during the treatment, she suddenly suffered cardiorespiratory arrest at the clinic. She was rushed to a hospital and placed on life support in intensive care. Her doctors fought to stabilize her for 8 days before confirming brain death. The exact complication that caused the cardiac arrest has not been publicly disclosed. The tragedy came just one day after she and her husband had celebrated their 8th wedding anniversary. After her death, her family announced they would donate her organ to give others the chance to live. In the summer of 1983, 53-year-old Silvano from a noble Venetian family died in Bologna, Italy, after developing one of the strangest and most terrifying inherited diseases ever documented, fatal familial insomnia. The illness began in middle age and slowly destroyed the part of his brain responsible for sleep, until Silvano gradually lost the ability to sleep at all. Days turned into weeks without rest as his body deteriorated, his brain slipping into delusions and hallucinations as doctors watched helplessly. The disease literally ate away at his brain tissue, and within a few months, the total absence of sleep led to organ failure and death. This was the moment drivers on a highway in San Antonio, Texas, realized something was seriously wrong with the man behind a drifting SUV. Recognizing a medical emergency, 29-year-old Rene Valerio Albi pulled his truck in front of the SUV and gradually slowed down, allowing the runaway vehicle to bump into his bumper until both eventually came to a stop. The driver had suffered a heart attack, and a nurse who stopped at the scene began administering CPR, helping to revive him until paramedics arrived. Doctors said he's expected to make a full recovery thanks to the quick actions of a few strangers. Here's an insane clip of a man narrowly avoiding a horrific death by elevator. Commenters pointed out that he's lucky enough he didn't get crushed, but he also could have easily fallen down the shaft once the elevator moved. Here's a horrifying scene as tourists desperately flee an erupting Mount Etna in Sicily as thick plumes of ash and smoke rise behind them. Mount Etna is Europe's most active volcano and one of the most active in the world, erupting frequently as magma constantly pushes toward the surface beneath the mountain. Despite its constant activity, most eruptions involve slow-moving ash plumes that give people enough time to evacuate. Deaths from this volcano are extremely rare in modern times, though hikers and tourists have occasionally been injured after getting too close to active craters.
Hechtenis dient te worden.
That was the moment a grieving father threw a chair at a judge inside a Dutch courtroom after hearing the sentence for the man responsible for killing his family members. In 2013, a speeding driver lost control of his car in Mayol, Netherlands, striking and killing a 2-year-old girl and her grandparents as they rode bicycles. The driver was initially sentenced to just 120 hours of community service and a 1-year suspended license, a ruling that sparked outrage in the courtroom. Prosecutors later appealed, and the sentence was increased to 15 months in prison and a 4-year driving ban. Elderly Englishman Stan Beaton kept a voicemail greeting recorded years earlier that included the voice of his wife Ruby, who died of cancer in 2003. For more than a decade, he would play the message almost every day just to hear her voice again. When a telecommunications system upgrade accidentally deleted the recording, engineers at the phone company spent several days searching archive servers until they were finally able to recover it. When the message was played for him again during a BBC interview, Beaton broke down in tears after hearing his wife's voice for the first time since it was lost. This was the mask worn by 51-year-old Vance Luther Bolter when he posed as a police officer and ambushed Minnesota State Senator John Hoffman and his wife Yvette at their Champlin home in June of 2025. Dressed in a tactical vest and carrying a flashlight, he knocked on their door in the middle of the night, and the moment Hoffman said, "You're not a cop," Bolter opened fire. Bullets tore through the couple in their doorway. John struck 9 times, Yvette 8, as their terrified daughter Hope hid just feet away while her mother shielded her body with her own. Somehow, both parents survived after hours of surgery, but they were left in critical condition. However, the carnage didn't stop there. Hours later, Bolter stormed into the home of Minnesota House Speaker Melissa Hortman, executing she and her husband Gary as they both slept. Investigators later uncovered that he carried a disturbing hit list, targeting Democratic politicians and abortion providers, revealing the massacre as a carefully planned campaign of political terror, one that left Minnesota shaken to its core. This was the terrifying moment a driver realized he was about to be carjacked. He turns down a narrow street at night and is immediately met by a group of men waving weapons that look like machetes. But instead of backing out, he moves forward, only to realize the road has been deliberately blocked. 2 large tanker trucks are positioned on the street, and a fallen tree is laid out between them, leaving almost no way through. Within seconds, the men rush the car and start smashing the windows, trying to force their way inside. The driver panics but stays moving, squeezing the car through a tight gap along the side of the road, barely clearing the obstacles as the attackers were closing in. He manages to break past them and speed off before they can get the doors open. Incidents like this are a known tactic across parts of the world where organized roadside robberies happen frequently, with criminals blocking roads to trap drivers before surrounding the vehicle. It's not clear where this particular clip took place, but the setup matches methods that have been commonly reported across the globe. I got nothing else to say. What are you still doing here? In 1823, near the Grand River in present-day South Dakota, American frontiersman Hugh Glass was brutally mauled by a grizzly bear, leaving him with a broken leg, a torn scalp exposing his skull, and deep claw wounds across his back and throat. Believing he would certainly die, 2 fellow trappers assigned to watch him abandoned him and stole his weapons and supplies. But against all odds, Glass miraculously survived. With no gear and barely able to move, he set his own broken leg and began dragging himself across the wilderness while tracking down the men who had betrayed him. To prevent infection, he reportedly let maggots consume the dead flesh in his wounds, survived on berries and roots, and once scared wolves off a bison carcass so he could eat it. After crawling roughly 200 miles through the frontier, Glass reached Fort Kiowa on the Missouri River, completing one of the most legendary survival stories in American history and inspiring the Revenant. For nearly 6 years, a woman named Lydia Abate has searched obituaries to find recently deceased people and contacted their families offering free estate cleanouts. In exchange, she requests to keep the vintage clothing left behind by the deceased. By collecting garments from the estates of people who have died, Abate has built an entire wardrobe and said she hasn't had to buy clothes in years. In 1998, during an Olympic Airways flight from Athens to New York City, a passenger suffered a severe asthma attack after being seated near the smoking section. His wife repeatedly asked a flight attendant to move him away from the cigarette smoke, but she was first told there were no empty seats and later that the crew was too busy. The man's condition worsened during the flight and he later died from the attack. His widow sued the airline and was eventually awarded about $1.4 million in damages. In Gainesville, Georgia, a group of high school students decided to prank their math teacher by toilet papering his yard late at night. When 40-year-old teacher and golf coach Jason Hughes ran outside, he was reportedly joking around and pretending to catch them in the act as they ran back to their car. But as the teens tried to speed away, Hughes slipped on the wet pavement and fell into the road. One of the students, an 18-year-old driving a pickup truck, accidentally ran him over. Hughes was rushed to the hospital but tragically died from his injuries. The driver was initially charged with first-degree vehicular homicide, while several other students were arrested for trespassing and littering. But Hughes's family later asked prosecutors to drop the charges, saying the beloved teacher cared deeply about his students and never would have wanted any of their lives destroyed over a prank. In 2013, in Los Angeles, California, 15-year-old Paris Jackson was hospitalized after a serious self-harm attempt. It came 4 years after the 2009 death of her father, Michael Jackson, during a period where she was dealing with intense grief, constant media attention, online harassment, and widespread public speculation that she wasn't biologically his daughter. She was placed under psychiatric care following the incident, marking one of the lowest points in her life after losing her father. When Michael died in 2009 in Los Angeles, it was revealed his finances were far worse than people realized. Despite his global fame, he was reportedly $500 million in debt, tied to massive loans, legal costs, and the upkeep of assets like Neverland Ranch. His death triggered a complex financial collapse behind the scenes, forcing his estate into an immediate battle to stabilize what he left behind. Immediately after his death, Michael's body was held for weeks during autopsies and investigations, and kept in a private mausoleum as family disputes and legal issues delayed the funeral. His public memorial at Staples Center drew millions, ending with his daughter Paris Jackson breaking down in tears in one of the only times she ever spoke publicly.
Ever since I was born, Daddy has been the best father you could ever imagine. And I just wanted to say I love him so much.
But even after he was finally laid to rest more than 2 months later, his death triggered years of lawsuits, accusations, and renewed abuse claims, including those reignited by the documentary Leaving Neverland. Instead of closure, everything around him only grew more disputed, leaving behind a legacy that's still being argued over long after his death. Here's an incredible video of a mother deer in someone's yard with not one but 2 albino fawns beside her. Albino deer are extremely rare, estimated to occur in roughly 1 out of every 20,000 births. Seeing 2 at once is even rarer, but it likely means the fawns are twins, sharing the same genetic mutation that prevents their bodies from producing any pigment. The condition gives them their ghost white fur and pink eyes, but it also makes survival in the wild much harder, since their lack of camouflage and vision problems make them easier targets for predators. Because of this, many albino deer unfortunately don't live very long in the wild. After traveling for 9 years and covering more than 3 billion miles, NASA's New Horizons spacecraft finally reached Pluto in 2015. When it flew past the distant dwarf planet, it captured this video revealing something no one expected. Massive icy mountains rising thousands of feet above Pluto's surface. Made of frozen water as hard as rock, some of these peaks rise more than 11,000 feet high. And because Pluto's so small, you can actually see the planet's curvature right behind them, making the mountains look enormous against the horizon. In 2019, a man in rural Australia was gored to death by his own pet deer, an animal he had raised for years. It happened during mating season, when even normally tame stags can turn violently territorial. The deer charged without warning, slamming its antlers into him repeatedly and fatally wounding him. When his wife ran over to help, the animal attacked her too, leaving her critically injured before police shot it dead. Deer attacks are extremely rare, but during rutting season, even a beloved pet can turn into a deadly threat. In 2010, at Vortex Spring in Florida, 30-year-old Ben McDaniel entered the site's underwater cave system alone. The cave is known for tight, winding passages that require specialized training. McDaniel apparently went past safety restrictions into deeper sections and never resurfaced. Days later, his scuba tanks were found inside the caves, but despite multiple recovery attempts, his body has never been located. His disappearance remains unsolved, as he likely became trapped deep within the cave system, essentially swallowed by the cave itself, where recovery is impossible. Extra Morbid Facts, Part 163. Christopher John Sulos was a kind 37-year-old man with intellectual disabilities including autism, who worked as a beloved greeter at a Chick-fil-A in Charlotte, North Carolina. But one day in September of 2024, a customer said there was an emergency and asked to borrow his phone. Instead, they stole it from him and used it to try transferring money from his account. They then began sending harassing messages to him and his family, falsely accusing him of being a pervert and other serious sexual misconduct. The perpetrators soon threatened to spread these accusations to his employer and the public unless a ransom was paid. The relentless harassment and fear of public humiliation caused Sulos severe emotional distress. Believing he had genuinely done something wrong, he tragically took just a few days later. His family and federal investigators linked the cyberstalking, extortion, and false accusations directly to his death. The people responsible were later convicted and sentenced to 27 and 41 months in prison. In Ottawa, Canada, in 2012, staff at the Conservative Party of Canada's headquarters called police after discovering a package emitting a foul odor. Party official Jenny Byrne had unknowingly handled the contents, which investigators later determined was a decomposing human foot belonging to Jun Lin, a Chinese international student who'd been murdered and dismembered by Luca Minata in Montreal, Quebec. Several other body parts were mailed to political offices and schools across Canada before Minata fled the country. He was later captured in Berlin, Germany, convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison. In South River, New Jersey, 49-year-old Anna Amato was arrested after allegedly posing as a dentist and performing dental work without a license. She reportedly advertised cheap procedures in WhatsApp group chats and agreed to perform a $1,000 root canal on a patient. After injecting anesthetic and drilling into the man's tooth, she suddenly stopped mid-procedure and told him to come back later. Days afterwards, she admitted she couldn't finish the root canal and suggested he see a real dentist instead. The patient later went to police with gauze in his mouth and still bleeding in excruciating pain after she allegedly refused to refund his $300 deposit. Investigators soon discovered Amato was never licensed to practice dentistry, and she was arrested in February of 2026 on charges including aggravated assault and impersonating a dentist. In 2010 in Philadelphia, federal agents and local authorities raided a clinic run by Kermit Gosnell, initially suspecting it was operating as a pill mill. What they found inside was far more horrific than illegal prescriptions. Investigators reported a pervasive stench, filthy conditions, and blood-stained equipment left uncleaned. The clinic was described as so unsanitary that several agents said they felt physically ill while searching it. As the investigation expanded, it was revealed that Gosnell had been performing late-term abortions under dangerous conditions, often far outside legal limitations. According to testimony, babies born alive were killed by severing their spinal cords. Untrained staff were heavily involved in procedures, and essential medical standards were ignored. Authorities also found fetal remains scattered throughout the clinic, including in a freezer, jars, bags, and plastic jugs. The grand jury later described the place as a baby charnel house. In 2013, Gosnell was convicted of multiple counts of first-degree murder, including the deaths of the infants born alive, as well as involuntary manslaughter in the death of one of his patients. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. In 1989, in Bangkok, Thailand, Billy Idol went on a drug-fueled binge after a breakup that spiraled out of control. Later admitted the trip involved heroin, alcohol, and heavy tranquilizer use, leaving him erratic and destructive. He reportedly trashed multiple luxury hotel suites, leaving behind severe damage and hundreds of thousands of dollars in unpaid bills. The situation soon escalated to the point where authorities were forced to intervene. Billy later said he was tranquilized and strapped to a military stretcher before being carried out and deported, with the Thai army reportedly involved in carrying him out. Idol has since described the incident as one of the lowest points of his life, driven by severe drug abuse and a reckless lifestyle that nearly destroyed him. In 1999, in Towanda, Pennsylvania, 11-year-old Adam Herman disappeared from his adoptive home. No missing persons report was filed at the time. For years afterward, his adoptive parents told family he was returned to state custody, while continuing to claim him as a dependent on taxes, legal filings, and collecting adoptive subsidy payments. In 2008, after his adoptive sister tried to reconnect with him as an adult, she discovered records falsely showed he had lived with the family until age 18. She then reported him missing nearly a decade after he vanished. The adoptive parents were later convicted of fraud for collecting thousands in payments after his disappearance, but no one has ever been charged in connection with what happened to Adam, as his fate remains unknown. Hugh Jackman has had multiple basal cell carcinomas removed, a type of skin cancer caused by long-term UV exposure. These cancers often start off as small, easy-to-miss spots, but can slowly grow deeper into surrounding tissue if left untreated, in some cases eroding skin and underlying structures. His repeated diagnoses suggest damage that continues to surface years after the initial exposure. While rarely fatal, basal cell carcinoma can quietly develop, recur, and progressively invade tissue, making it more serious than most people realize. He's since used his experience to warn others about the dangers of UV exposure, regularly urging people to wear sunscreen and get their skin checked. In 2004 in South Africa, trophy hunter Ryan Naud, who ran Pro Hunt Africa and was known for killing endangered animals, was found dead beside his broken-down truck on a remote road. His vehicle had overheated, leaving him stranded and alone. When police arrived, he was lying next to the truck with multiple gunshot wounds, suggesting he had been approached at close range and executed. There were no clear signs of a struggle, and his belongings were left behind, making the motive unclear. Many speculate the killing was retaliatory due to his work killing protected wildlife, but no suspects were ever identified, and the case remains unsolved. Joey Gatos Jr., the child actor who played Zach Mooneyham in School of Rock, was arrested in Florida in 2019 after allegedly stealing multiple guitars and amplifiers from local music stores. Authorities said he'd enter shops, test out pricey instruments like a professional, then simply walk out the door with them before pawning them off for quick cash. The spree reportedly lasted several weeks before he was caught, and police suggested the thefts were connected to struggles with substance abuse. Once celebrated for his guitar skills on screen, Gatos' real-life downfall was a far cry from the rock star dream that made him famous. In 1926, jazz legend Fats Waller was leaving a Chicago nightclub when 4 armed men suddenly grabbed him, threw him into a car, and drove off. Initially terrified, Waller soon realized he wasn't being robbed. He was being delivered as a surprise birthday gift to none other than mob boss Al Capone. Forced to play piano at Capone's private party, Waller ended up performing for 3 straight days, while dozens of gangsters cheered, drank, and shoved cash into his pockets. When it was finally all over, Waller stumbled out of the mansion completely drunk, covered in sweat, and stuffed with thousands of dollars in tips. Despite the bizarre ordeal, Waller reportedly laughed it off afterwards, saying it was the best paying gig he ever had by far. Steven Stucker, best known for playing the chaotic air controller in Airplane, died in 1986 at just 38 years old due to complications with AIDS. At the time, the disease was still poorly understood, widely feared, and heavily stigmatized, especially within the entertainment industry. He publicly revealed his diagnosis in 1985, making him one of the first recognizable entertainers to speak openly about having AIDS during a period when many kept it hidden out of fear of backlash and discrimination. Like many early AIDS patients, his condition quickly deteriorated before any effective treatments existed. His death came at a time when thousands were dying under similar circumstances, helping to bring more visibility to a crisis that had long been ignored. In 1978, in Birmingham, England, medical photographer Janet Parker became the last person to die from smallpox after being exposed at the University of Birmingham Medical School, likely through airborne transmission from a laboratory working with the virus just 1 floor below her office. She developed symptoms days later and died on September 11th after several weeks in isolation. The outbreak triggered a massive public health response, including quarantines and emergency vaccines, but no further cases spread beyond Janet. During the crisis, her father suffered a fatal heart attack while visiting her in the hospital. The laboratory's head, Professor Henry Bedson, later died by suicide amid intense scrutiny over the incident. This was the horrifying moment when Jane Goodall uncovered the savage truth behind chimpanzees. In the 1970s, Goodall and her team witnessed a shocking 4-year conflict known today as the Gombe Chimpanzee War. A single chimp community in Tanzania split into 2 rival factions, and the carnage that followed shattered the long-held belief that chimps were peaceful creatures. The war started when 6 males ambushed a lone rival and tore him to shreds, and over the next few years, the stronger group carried out coordinated raids in which every male of the weaker side was hunted down and killed in brutal fashion. Females were beaten, kidnapped, and often murdered until the losing community was completely wiped out. For Goodall, who had once described her chimps as gentle and idyllic, the violence was devastating. She admitted to having constant nightmares about the carnage and about watching individuals she had known since infancy transform into cold-blooded killers. The scientific world was equally shaken. The war revealed that chimpanzees, like humans, are capable not only of affection and cooperation, but also of organized warfare, murder, and ruthless extermination. In 2005, Florida retirees Reggie and Carol Sumner thought they had found peace in their Jacksonville home, but instead, they fell victim to one of the most sadistic crimes imaginable. Lured by Tiffany Cole, a woman they once treated like family, the couple was ambushed by her and 3 accomplices, who bound, gagged, and stuffed them into the trunk of their own car. They were driven across state lines to a remote patch of Georgia woods where a grave had already been dug for them. Still alive, terrified, and gasping for air, the Sumners were thrown into the hole and buried alive beneath the dirt, left to slowly suffocate as the killers laughed about the money they were about to steal. The reason for this unimaginable cruelty was shockingly small: to steal from the couple's life savings of less than $100,000. All 4 were quickly caught and convicted, with Tiffany later being sentenced to death. Here's an image showing what the sinking of the Titanic would have actually looked like on April 15, 1912. It was a moonless night in the North Atlantic, and once the ship's power failed, the massive liner disappeared into near total darkness, leaving over 1,500 people unable to clearly see the ship, the lifeboats, or even each other. Many survivors later reported hearing screams from the water but couldn't see anything, as the lack of light turned the disaster into something disorienting and almost invisible. It wasn't just the freezing temperatures that made it so horrifying, it was also the darkness, where one of the worst disasters in maritime history unfolded out of sight. In 1922, a young girl with severe diabetes was photographed while essentially waiting to die, at a time when the condition was almost always fatal, especially in children. Before there was any treatment, patients were often placed on near-starvation diets to slow the disease, leaving them dangerously weak while their bodies continued to deteriorate. That same year, doctors administered a new experimental treatment called insulin, one of the first times it had ever been used on a human. Within days, patients who were expected to die began to recover. The discovery transformed diabetes from a death sentence into a manageable condition almost overnight. Here's an insane video taken by a museum visitor showing the incredible detail in a painting from the 1600s. The artwork is cognoscenti in a room hung with pictures, painted around 1620 by Flemish artists Willem van Heekt and Jan Bruegel the Younger. Scenes like this were known as gallery painting, a genre that depicted wealthy collectors showing off rooms packed with artworks, sculptures, and curiosities. Many of the tiny paintings shown inside the scene are actually real masterpieces of the time, carefully recreated in miniature fashion. Here's a photo of mummified crocodiles in the Egyptian Museum, a practice that dates back more than 2,000 years in ancient Egypt. Crocodiles were associated with the crocodile-headed god Sobek, who was believed to control the power of the Nile and protect people from its dangers. In temples dedicated to Sobek, crocodiles were sometimes raised in sacred pools, adorned with jewelry, and treated as living embodiments of the god. When they died, priests carefully mummified them using linen wrappings and resins, just like they did to humans. Thousands of crocodile mummies have been discovered in Egypt, including entire burial caches filled with both adult crocodiles and hatchlings, which were likely offered as religious sacrifices to the god. This was the final note written by Marie Antoinette at 4:30 a.m. on October 16, 1793, just hours before she was executed in Paris, France during the French Revolution. Addressed to her sister-in-law Madame Elizabeth from her cell, the letter includes the lines, "My lord, have pity on me. My eyes have no more tears to cry for you, my poor children. Farewell, farewell." Later that morning, Marie Antoinette was taken through the streets of Paris and executed by guillotine at the age of 37. This clip from a 1995 talk show would later become key evidence in a murder case.
Let's have John come out here and see who has the crush on him. Here's John. Did you think Donna had the crush on you?
Did I? No, we're good friends.
Well, guess what? It's Scott that has the crush on you.
You lied to me.
1995, 32-year-old Scott Amador appeared on The Jenny Jones Show to reveal a secret crush on his longtime friend Jonathan Schmitz. Before the taping, producers had reportedly told Schmitz that a woman had a crush on him, not that the admirer would actually be his male friend. When the truth was revealed on stage, Schmitz appeared to take the surprise in stride and even laughed it off in front of the studio audience. But after the episode was recorded, he apparently became deeply embarrassed by the public revelation. Just 3 days later in Michigan, Schmitz bought a shotgun, drove to Amador's home, and shot him twice in the chest, killing him instantly. He then called 911 and confessed to the shooting. Schmitz was later convicted of second-degree murder and sentenced to 25 to 50 years in prison, eventually being released on parole in 2017. The killing, which became known as the Jenny Jones murder, sparked a nationwide debate about the ethics of 1990s ambush-style talk shows and the use of the so-called gay panic defense in court. Rama Haruna was born in Nigeria in 1996 and appeared healthy at birth, but at around 6 months old, she suddenly became ill and her body stopped developing normally. As she got older, most of her body stopped growing and she lost the ability to sit or stand, leaving her with a severely shortened torso and almost no functioning limbs. While her body remained extremely small, her head continued to grow and age normally, creating a striking contrast that doctors were never able to fully explain. Because she couldn't move on her own, Rama's family often carried her around in a large plastic bucket so she could leave the house. Despite constant pain, she remained mentally sharp and spoke about wanting to live a normal life. She died in 2016 at the age of 19 after living her entire life with the unexplained condition. In the 1840s, Anarcha Westcott, an enslaved black woman, was forced to undergo about 30 experimental gynecological surgeries performed by Dr. J. Marion Sims, who was later known as the father of modern gynecology. Sims was apparently trying to repair childbirth injuries called fistulas, and the procedures were carried out without anesthesia at a time when many physicians believed African Americans couldn't feel pain. Although his techniques influenced early gynecology, Anarcha has come to symbolize how much medical advancement was built on the suffering of enslaved women. Today, she's remembered as one of the mothers of gynecology, not for a discovery she chose, but for what she was forced to endure. Here's an incredible look at a 2,000-year-old Roman aqueduct that still carries water today. Hidden beneath the ruins of Smyrna Agora in Izmir, Turkey, this ancient underground channel was built during the Roman Empire to supply the city of Smyrna with fresh water. Using carefully engineered stone tunnels and gravity alone, Roman engineers directed water from nearby hills through passageways beneath the city. Remarkably, parts of the system still function nearly 2 millennia later, with water continuing to flow through the same channels built by ancient Roman engineers. Ferdinand Postman Cheval was a French mailman who spent 33 years building an enormous stone palace using nothing but the rocks he collected on his daily route. With no architectural training and only a wheelbarrow and simple hand tools, he worked night after night to assemble columns, towers, archways, and sculptures into a dreamlike structure he called the ideal palace. For the longest time, people in his village thought he was eccentric, but the finished palace was so extraordinary that France eventually declared it a National Historic Monument. In 2012, 2-year-old Maddox Durkosh was visiting the Pittsburgh Zoo and Aquarium with his mother when she lifted him onto a safety railing to get a better view of the African wild dogs. But the toddler soon lost his balance and fell 14 feet into the enclosure, which housed a pack of 11 dogs. Zookeepers and emergency responders rushed to intervene, but the animals quickly surrounded the child, and the attack lasted several minutes before zookeepers could drive them away. By the time rescuers had reached him, very little of Maddox had remained. Investigators later ruled the death a tragic accident, and the zoo temporarily closed the exhibit while reviewing safety procedures. In 1943, in Lyon, France, French resistance leader Raymond Aubrac was captured by the Gestapo and sentenced to death. But his wife Lucy organized a daring ambush to rescue him while he was being transported by Nazi officers. Resistance fighters attacked the convoy in broad daylight, killing several Gestapo agents and freeing Raymond along with other prisoners. The couple survived the war and remained married for more than 60 years, staying together until Lucy's death in 2007. This video has been causing panic across the internet after 2 rare doomsday fish washed ashore on a beach in Cabo, Mexico. Creatures are called oarfish, long ribbon-like deep-sea animals that normally live thousands of feet below the surface and are almost never seen by humans. According to Japanese folklore, oarfish are known as messengers from the sea god's palace and are said to appear before major disasters. In reality, when oarfish are seen near the surface or close to the shore, it often means they're sick, injured, or dying, which is one of the reasons why sightings are so rare. But because of the old folklore surrounding them and recent current events, the appearance of 2 at the same beach quickly sparked alarm online. Scientists in Melbourne, Australia recently did something incredible by connecting about 200,000 living human brain cells grown in a lab dish to a computer and using them to play the 1993 video game Doom. Neurons, grown from human stem cells and placed on a microchip with electrodes, received electrical signals representing what was happening in the game. When the cells fired in certain patterns, the system translated that activity into in-game actions like moving or shooting enemies. Researchers said the neurons showed signs of learning through feedback, though they currently perform poorly and often die during experiments. The project, developed by Cortical Labs as part of its biological computer, is an attempt to combine living human brain tissue with silicone hardware. This woman's crimes were so horrific that she became the first female in the history of France to receive a full life sentence. In 2022, 12-year-old Lola Davier disappeared after school in Paris, and security footage from the apartment building where she lived with her family showed her walking inside with 27-year-old Dabia Ben-Kirid following closely behind. Hours later, Lola's body was found stuffed inside a plastic storage box in the lobby of that same building. Investigators say Ben-Kirid lured the girl into her own sister's apartment, who lived upstairs, where she forced Lola to shower, taped her face, stabbed her repeatedly, and subjected her to what the judge called true torture, ultimately killing her through asphyxiation before eventually decapitating her. Ben-Kirid initially confessed, then kept changing her story, and even showed complete indifference when confronted with photos of the gruesome crime. In 2025, 1975, she became the first woman in French history to receive a whole life sentence, a punishment previously reserved for only 4 men. The tragedy deepened when Lola's father died in 2024 from alcohol-related complications brought on by the grief of losing his daughter. Brian Egg vanished in August of 2018 after suddenly disappearing from his San Francisco home. Weeks later, police went to the house for a welfare check and discovered a hidden room concealed behind a fake wall. Inside was a single large fish tank containing Brian's body, decapitated and missing both hands. Investigators later determined he'd been murdered by his roommate after an argument over rent and drug money while the two were using cocaine. After killing him, the roommate cut off Brian's head and hands, hid the body in the aquarium, filled it with water to slow down the decomposition, and sealed the room behind a fake wall. The killer, named Jeffrey Francisco, then fled the state but was eventually tracked down and arrested. Although he was originally charged with murder and facing several decades in prison, Francisco was allowed to plead guilty to voluntary manslaughter, which made him eligible for early parole. In 2021, after only serving about 7 years of a 15-year sentence, the killer was released, a decision that sparked outrage when the public learned he was free. This man is exactly why you should always lock your doors no matter what. Richard Chase, known as the Vampire of Sacramento, was a severely schizophrenic serial killer who believed his blood was drying up since he couldn't get his schlong up. In his twisted mind, the only cure was to drink blood and consume organs to restore himself. He started with wild animals, blending their organs with soda, but in 1977 he escalated, murdering 6 people within a month. He had one horrifying rule: if a door was locked, he walked away, but if it was unlocked, he took it as an invitation from God to enter. Once inside, Chase committed violent crimes so graphic even veteran detectives vomited. He shot his victims, drank their blood straight from the wounds, disemboweled them, cannibalized body parts, and even stuffed animal feces into their mouths. In one case, he decapitated a 22-month-old baby and blended the organs into a drink. Police later found a blender filled with human organs mixed with orange juice, a human smoothie he kept in his fridge like groceries. While in court, he showed zero remorse, insisting that he had to kill or else he would die. Sentenced to death by gas chamber in 1979, even other death row inmates were terrified of him and begged guards to keep him away. But before the state could execute him, Chase overdosed on hoarded antidepressants in his cell and died at the young age of 30. Here's a police sketch that was released during the investigation into the disappearance of 3-year-old Madeleine McCann, a case that remains unsolved nearly 2 decades later. In 2007, Madeleine vanished from a holiday apartment in Praia da Luz, Portugal, while her parents were dining nearby. She'd been left asleep with her younger siblings, and when her mother went to check on the children later that night, Madeleine's bed was empty and the bedroom window was open. As the investigation dragged on, police issued multiple suspect sketches based on eyewitness accounts, including one female person of interest that later drew widespread attention due to its striking resemblance to Ghislaine Maxwell, the British former socialite who was convicted in 2021 of trafficking girls for Jeffrey Epstein. Despite one of the largest missing child investigations in European history, no definitive trace of Madeleine has ever been found, as her fate remains unknown. Dan Burroughs was a high-ranking white supremacist in the 1960s, serving as the 3rd highest member of the American Nazi Party and a Grand Dragon of the New York KKK. But in 1965, the New York Times revealed that Burroughs was actually Jewish, raised in a Jewish family, attended Hebrew school, and even had a bar mitzvah. Hours after the article was published, and the organizations he led immediately disavowed him as the revelation became public. This 2,000-year-old mummy shows astonishing precision in the linen wrapping around its head, layered so neatly it looks machine-woven rather than done by hand. The unique artifact is the only mummy housed in the Louvre Museum, offering an incredible glimpse into how carefully the ancient Egyptians prepared their dead for eternity. When this Roman mosaic was unearthed in modern-day Turkey, archaeologists realized it had survived an earthquake without cracking, the waves of stone still perfectly frozen in the moment the earth vibrated beneath it. The horse-drawn omnibus of the 1890s was once the most reliable form of transport in city streets. Crowded with strangers and pulled by exhausted animals, it clattered over cobblestones long before the first car horn ever sounded. Czech photographer Miroslav Tishy built his cameras out of trash, cardboard tubes, tin cans, and bits of string. The crude lenses produced blurry, distorted images that looked damaged or decayed, yet he embraced the flaws. Between the 60s and 80s, he took thousands of photos of women in his hometown, turning obsession, imperfection, and voyeurism into an unsettling form of art. Sweden once let the public public crawl inside the world's only taxidermied blue whale, a 19th century relic preserved at the Natural History Museum in Gothenburg. Built in 1865, the exhibit was so massive that visitors could walk through its body to view a small museum inside. But in the 1970s, public access was abruptly ended when a couple was reportedly caught having intercourse inside the whale's belly. This little girl was diagnosed with dementia before she even turned 4. When Sophia Scott was 3 years old, her parents noticed her speaking and development were going backwards. The day before her 4th birthday, doctors told her family she had Sanfilippo syndrome, a rare genetic disease that prevents the body from breaking down certain sugars, causing them to build up in the brain and slowly destroy the nervous system. They were told there was no treatment and that she was unlikely to survive past her teenage years. Sophia developed mostly normally at first, but around age 6 she began to decline. Over time, she lost her speech, memory, and her ability to walk and care for herself. She later developed seizures, sleep apnea, scoliosis, bowel problems, and more than 30 different symptoms. Sanfilippo syndrome is often called childhood Alzheimer's, and most children begin showing symptoms between ages 1 and 4, usually dying in their teens. Now 15 years old, Sophia has lost much of her abilities. Her family continues searching for experimental treatment, but doctors believe it may be too late to reverse the damage. In the final stages of this disease, the brain forgets how to control basic functions like swallowing and breathing, and most patients die from complications such as pneumonia, respiratory failure, or cardiac arrest. In November of 2021, 23-year-old Tina Tintor was driving home in Las Vegas after taking her golden retriever Max out for a late-night walk when her car was suddenly struck at more than 150 miles per hour by NFL wide receiver Henry Ruggs III, who was heavily intoxicated. The impact sent her Toyota RAV4 up in flames, trapping both Tina and Max inside as bystanders desperately tried but failed to pull them out. Both were killed in the blaze, and Ruggs, who had a BAC more than twice the legal limit, was later sentenced to prison for DUI, resulting in death. In 1991, schizophrenic artist Brian Charnley began a project unlike any other. He would paint 17 self-portraits as he gradually stopped taking his medication, documenting his slow descent into psychosis. Each canvas grew more chaotic and fragmented, mirroring his unraveling mind. His final portrait, completed on the varied 1991, remains a chilling testament to both his mental illness and artistic talent. In 2012, 18-year-old Gabby Scanlon was celebrating her birthday at Oscar's Wine Bar in Lancaster, England, when staff served her a cocktail topped with liquid nitrogen. Moments after downing the smoking drink, she felt a violent pain in her abdomen. Doctors later said it was as if her stomach had exploded from the freezing chemical. She was rushed into emergency surgery, where doctors had to remove her entire stomach and reroute her digestive tract just to save her life. 3 years later, in 2015, the bar was fined £100,000 for failing to recognize the danger of serving cocktails still bubbling with liquid nitrogen. Kansas City pharmacist Robert Ray Courtney illegally diluted thousands of medications, including chemotherapy, over nearly a decade, claiming extra profit. Estimates put the number of affected patients at about 4,200, with some treatments watered down to as low as 17% of the prescribed dose. Convicted in 2002 and sentenced to 30 years, he was released to home confinement in 2024 under the First Step Act, sparking outrage from victims who think his actions contributed to serious harm and deaths. In August of 2020, 5-year-old Cannon Hinent was riding his bike outside of his Wilson, North Carolina home when his 25-year-old neighbor, Darius Sessoms, suddenly walked up and shot him point-blank in the head in front of his 2 sisters. The murder was described as execution style and left the community completely stunned, especially since Sessoms had shared dinner with Cannon's family just days prior. He was arrested within 24 hours and pleaded guilty to first-degree murder, receiving life in prison without the possibility of parole. To this day, no clear motive has ever been revealed. Here's a photo of George Lincoln Rockwell, founder of the American Nazi Party, at a 1967 rally. Rockwell built his movement around hate-filled rallies in open admiration for Hitler. But his end came not at the hands of his enemies. In August of 1967, Rockwell was gunned down outside of a laundromat in Arlington, Virginia, shot twice through his car window by John Patler, a bitter former ally he had recently expelled from the party. The man who preached violence and division was assassinated by one of his own followers, leaving the American Nazi Party leaderless and fractured. Proof that animals are evolving, Part 16. A 34-year-old orangutan at the Metro Richmond Zoo in Virginia named Patrick was given a royal cloak for his birthday, and without any training, he tied it around himself like a wearable outfit. Orangutans are already known for advanced problem-solving and tool use, but moments like this show just how far that intelligence can go. Instead of playing with it, Patrick used the fabric with a clear purpose. It's a small moment, but it highlights the level of cognitive ability orangutans are capable of. This orb weaver spider had nowhere to attach the bottom of its web, so it made its own anchor. With no stable point to build from, it picked up a small rock and used it to hold the entire structure together. Orb weavers are known for their precise, almost mechanical construction, but this goes beyond instinct. It shows they can adjust their strategy when conditions change, solving problems in real time. In this case, the spider effectively created a solution to the missing piece of its environment, creatively allowing it to hunt in a place it otherwise couldn't have. Why is he doing that, though?